Welcome. This is my channel, and I tell stories of the mysterious, twisted, and paranormal. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you for coming back. And if you are new to the channel, then welcome. And please consider subscribing and turning on your post notifications. But also get ready, because as of now, we're about to go on a journey, and as we do, we're about to slip into a mind that's not our own. So let's go. Now, there's an official website for pastime, cabins, RV park, and campground in the great Okefenokee swamp in southeast Georgia. And there is a section on there of mysterious lore in that area. Now, this includes documented paranormal stories of the unexplained and the unusual, along with some other weird stuff that has happened around that swamp. And this includes UFO sightings, alien abductions, hauntings, and Bigfoot. And there's this one account of a UFO that was sighted on the east side of the swamp in May 1998. And this sighting was observed over a several-mile area. And the editor of that local newspaper gave a description. And they said that it was a large, shiny black object which hovered for a bit of time and then broke into smaller objects and then flew away in different directions. And now there was no plausible explanation that ever came out of this. So I kept reading, however, and the next article really grabbed my attention when it said alien abduction. And they wrote that in early 1996 there was a former Everglades National Park ranger on vacation from upstate New York, and he was visiting the Okefenokee west side for bird watching. So this man, he put his canoe into the water at Stephen Forest Park. And then he, paddled through the water over to a place called Billy's Island. But after that, he did not return. And his canoe was later found that evening on Billy's Island. Now, over the next few weeks, local, state, and federal officials started a search for the man. And then it escalated into an extremely extensive search, where there were exhaustive searches of the island, and other ones that were conducted that were called hand-to-hand searches. And with those combined, searching an island, mind you, it turned up nothing. And there was even heat-seeking infrared helicopters that were brought in. And these things are very, very sensitive. Sensitive enough to identify small animals in the brush. And this man weighed over 300 pounds, and yet it turned up nothing. So then they send in the bloodhounds. And when they were brought in, the hounds could not pick up anything really beyond just this small loop of the man where he walked, just a small loop of trek. So after that, they brought in cadaver dogs, thinking, well, maybe the man's already dead. And they were brought in, believe it or not, they turned up nothing as well. So at this point, it seemed that all hope was gone. And it remained this way until about 40 days into the disappearance, when a disheveled man was seen by a boater leaning against a tree near the water's edge. And then a day after this sighting, a dazed man identified himself as the missing man when two other passing people on canoes went by. But it's about to get pretty crazy, especially when you start to think about it and you're like, wait, on an island? Okay, so this man was promptly brought to the hospital, and he was in a very confused and disoriented state, and he was not very informative as to what happened to him. Now, believe it or not, the man insisted that he had been wandering around just aimlessly around that island the whole time. And get this particular island is a small, well-used island, and federal, state, and local officials involved in the search do not buy his story even for a second. But that man at least thinks that he's telling the truth. Now, he has never publicly stated that he was abducted, And speculation around the swamp is he was taken from the island without his knowledge, then returned sometime after the search party had died down a bit. And with his memory seemingly erased, this seems like a classic UFO abduction that had been perpetrated. I mean, what do you think? Let me know in the comments right now. Do you think this was an alien abduction? If so, right now in the comments put yes, because it's certainly a baffling story. And in fact, by checking archives of newspapers from back then, it appears that this disappearance did indeed happen, and all of this is factual. Now, the man who went missing, his name was Mike Goodell, and he was a former ranger at Everglades National Park. He was 33 years old at the time and working as a corrections officer, and his disappearance happened on February 4th, 1996. Now, the Florida Times-Union reported that he was off on a 3-mile trip to the Belize Island where he planned to spend the day exploring the ruins of an old logging community. Then Mike wasn't seen again. And nearly a month later, the mystery of what happened to the corrections officer baffled his family members, park rangers, and dozens of Georgia and Florida law enforcement officers who were personally searching for him. Now, it's known that 2 to 5 people a year get lost there and have to be rescued. But park rangers say that they cannot remember anyone who went in and did not come out without being found. And Mike was an excellent camper and trailman who knew enough to stay put if he got lost. Then on record, you have William Goodell, who was his father, who literally said it was like a UFO sucked him up. Now, Mike's abandoned canoe, like I said, was found on Billy's Island, sparking the search that eventually involved more than 80 rescue workers, bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, and helicopters with sophisticated tracking devices. Now, the AP News wrote former Everglades National Park Ranger Goodell disappeared February 4th after paddling his canoe to Billy's Island, a desolate area in the swamp. And even though there was an extensive search of 8 square miles of the island, Mike was never spotted until the volunteers found him Friday on a trail near the spot where they had discovered his canoe early in the rescue operation 41 days later. Believe it or not, the searchers had actually given up looking for Mike Goodell on that small island when the group actually stumbled across him. I mean, this was totally an accident. They kind of almost wrote it off at this point. They searched for a long time, over 30 days, and then they were kind of like, we can't find him. There's really nothing we can do. And then just about 10 days after that, he shows up. So like I said, Mike Goodell was found 41 days later after his disappearance, and he was found on March 15th. And he was laying down on a dock, barely conscious, near the location where rangers found his canoe in the first place. And that's when he first disappeared. And this stunned every single person that was involved in this search. Like I said, most people had totally given up on finding Mike dead or alive. And when he was found, Mike was incoherent and required over 2 days of hospitalization before he was able to tell what really happened. And Mike also complained of having these pains all over his body. But to Mike, what really happened, at least in his mind, was that he literally was walking around aimlessly the whole time. Now, the doctors said that he was recovering really quickly from dehydration, cuts, and insect bites. And then Mike said that he tried to walk north to find his canoe on the 4x2 mile island, but apparently became confused while walking back and continuously walked in circles instead. This is what he said. So I want you all to use your imagination right now. Imagine an island that is 4 miles long and 2 miles across, and you have 3 different agencies plus almost 100 volunteers searching for you for over 40 days without finding you. And then somehow you randomly turn up and just say that you've been walking in circles the whole time in plain sight. I mean, it seems literally impossible. And during the search, Mike's sister Catherine speculated he somehow might have been taken off the island and then returned. But he told officials that he had been on the island the whole time, and Mike had lost more than 50 pounds during this ordeal. And this weight, he says, was lost because he just survived on bugs, some leaves and berries and swamp water. And when asked, he said, "I just hung out and I just kept walking around." Now, I don't know about you, but these seem like almost programmed answers. If somebody was to be abducted, these answers would make perfect sense. Yeah, just put him back and say, he ate some berries and bugs and that he just, walked around in a circle the whole time. The human beings, they'll believe that, sure. So they're saying that Mike was wandering endlessly through the thick foliage covered in Billy's Island, which is only an 8 square mile piece of land in the famed and used a lot southern swamp. And you got search parties using sophisticated equipment, and they couldn't track him down. If that's what they're going to tell me the official story is, well, then you know what? I don't buy it. But Mike stuck to his story. And, the disappearance baffled many of his family members and friends because of his experience as a former national park ranger and his extensive camping experience. Plus, and I know I'm reiterating now, but plus the search that involved more than 80 rescue workers, hounds, cadaver dogs, and helicopters made it incomprehensible to those he told when he returned back home to New York. And they said that it was impossible that the 5'5", almost 300-pound man was able to avoid detection if he was on an island which is 2 miles wide and 4 miles long for all that time. I'm glad somebody else agrees with me. So Mike Goodell was simply lost on a tiny island, walking around and around and around in circles as he thinks, and that's what really happened. Is it? Or did something really take him off that island? Just remember, all the exhaustive searches of the island were conducted, and they turned up absolutely nothing. Plus, the heat-seeking infrared helicopters that were brought in, like I said, sensitive enough to identify small animals. And this man weighed over 300 pounds. Turned up nothing. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Really good at their jobs. Found nothing. Bloodhounds were brought in, and all they could find was this little trail, like about 6 feet this way, 6 feet this way in a circle, and that's all they found. So they basically found nothing. So why couldn't they find him? Had he somehow been taken from the island during the time he was missing? And if so, what had taken him and what really happened to him? Because how could he have been walking around in circles on a tiny island for 40 days and nights and never be seen once? Now, I know I've been reiterating a lot of the same facts, but it's just something about this story, and it's times like this where, I will go out on my deck and I'll look up to the midnight sky and I'll just think for a couple minutes and I'll shake my head, and when it comes to extraterrestrial life, I'll just look and I'll say, I believe. But, like the iconic poster in the X-Files show, the real question is, do you believe? So please, if you enjoyed this, just take a moment to like, subscribe, and give this video a thumbs up. And the most important part, please share this video with at least one person, maybe even everybody you know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Where I tell stories about true crime, missing people, and the paranormal. As of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own.